physical due diligence. So there are several aspects to just doing due diligence, and one of them is the physical due diligence. So depending on the age of your property, you're going to try to walk the property with the experts for that particular specific to that property. Like if it's a boiler chiller property, I'm going to bring along somebody who can look at the equipment and tell me how soon I'll have to replace it. I definitely want to bring somebody who can climb the roof. I don't care how hot it is in Texas. You definitely want to bring someone with that. I bought an older 60s property. So you want to bring someone who can scope your plumbing lines to tell you what kind of issues you might run into. You want to read the offering memorandum very closely ahead of time. That's why I put some example in here, because if you're able to read that, it'll tell you what kind of wiring they have, when the roof was replaced, et cetera, right? All of that data that you collect from the OM to make a checklist, because it's unique to each property. It's not a general checklist. Oh, any property, I got to go check this and this. No. Why is this property unique? And what is a unique characteristic of it, which could be a risk or a benefit to me, depending on how I handle it. You don't have to be afraid that it's a chiller property. You just have to budget for it. Just have to budget a little more for the repairs. You have to see what the efficiencies are that you can get from it. How good are the windows, for example? That would indicate your heating and cooling level, right? Because if you're an all bills paid property, any energy savings is going to immediately impact you. So physical due diligence, let's talk about just the physical aspects of it. Plumbing is very important. The roof is an obvious one. So basically, I typically pay a company to come and do all aspects of the physical due diligence for me. They walk every unit and they have a long checklist. They also give me a digital files. They give me extensive photos, and they don't take the glamorous photos that you want to promote your property. They take all the ugly photos of all the problems and tell you so. So let's say in this particular case, this deal, they said every unit has a washer and dryer connection. So my business plan is about, oh, let me go put laundry, washers and dryers in there because the connections already exist. So then as part of your due diligence, what do you want to do? You want to make sure every unit when they walk, they make sure the washer and dryer connections actually work. Is there proper venting for the dryer? Can you actually go and install a washer and dryer? So is it really turnkey, or do I have to spend another couple of grand getting that washer dryer connection fixed, get delayed with permits before I can just order a machine from Home Depot and have it delivered and installed, right? So that's the kind of due diligence you have to do that is unique to every property. That's where if you have an offering memorandum, you want to read that very, very closely so you can determine what kind of experts you want to bring in there. What about electrical panels, right? They might say, oh, we just newly installed all these breaker boxes, replace every box on the inside of every unit. Well, that's great. What about the exteriors, right? What is it going to cost me to install that? The other thing that people don't think about is every little city has its own unique little things they emphasize for your inspection. So one city wants you to have a fire extinguisher every hallway, every unit kind of thing. Another city doesn't care. So I have two properties now. One of them, it's part of the requirement. Another one, they don't care. So we just store the extras, right? So it's important to know each city's uniqueness. And that's where your property management company comes in handy. So I like to get the property management company that I'm going to use on my property to be part of my due diligence. So we're still talking physical due diligence, right? So we already mentioned roofs. You want to know about air conditioners, right? If it's got air conditioners, you can plan to replace at least 10% every year. So like I acquired 154 doors. At a minimum, I'm going to replace 10 to 15% of them every year. And in the summer is when you have the biggest problem. So one of the things you want to think about is, depending on your location, does it make sense for me to pay a little bit extra per hour and have a HVAC certified technician as my lead maintenance person, especially through the summer, because that'll save me a lot of AC calls, a lot of frustration from tenants, right? So that's another thing that you do, which, I mean, it's not really physical due diligence as much as it's just general due diligence in my planning of this asset management process, right? You want to closely drive around every little driveway and every path of the property yourself, because that'll give you a feel for how good the roads are, the concrete is, any bumps, any cracks, and all of that, because those repairs are expensive and your lender will require them in most cases. So concrete repairs, you should budget for that. So that's another thing you want to take with your due diligence team, because your goal really is to go there with a set of contractors and say, okay, everything that is wrong with this property, I can fix, and there is a price for it. And that's what you're really hoping to get, is your CapEx and deferred maintenance budget. That's the goal of your due diligence. Which ones does it just make sense? I don't even want to repair this air conditioning unit. It's more than 8-9 years old. I'm just going to replace it instead of trying to repair it, right? That kind of a budget. You want to get a feel for how old the appliances are in there, if you can, right? So as you look at the appliance, you open the refrigerator door, for example, you can get a feel for, oh, is it actually maintaining its temperature? You can also ask the people when you visit a property in terms of the leasing office staff and the maintenance staff. Usually one of them or both of them walk with you when you tour the property. So a simple question to ask is, what are the biggest complaints you're getting from your tenants? And this is something you already look at ahead of time on Yelp. And you already know the reviews of this property, as well as all the neighboring properties. So if, let's say, 2 or 3 of the neighboring properties have a similar set of complaints, it's a valid one. You can ask them, do you ever have a problem with blah, whatever that might be, right? And then that'll again help you anticipate. Because when you take very good care of your tenants, they are your customers, then everything else falls in place. The reviews are great. They refer other people to your property. They're generally happy and they don't cause a lot of trouble. They typically at least try to pay their rents on time or come to you if there's a problem. So if you focus everything around what's a reasonable way that I can balance keeping my residents happy while still meeting my financial goals, then it's a win-win situation for all. So you want to read about the Yelp reviews, the complaints, what is their biggest problem? One property might have, a lot of pest control issues, right? Why is that? Is that because of bad habits by the residents? So as you walk every unit as part of your due diligence process, you will immediately note down. So I usually walk in with a spreadsheet that I already have on a clipboard or in a digital form. Typically, your due diligence company will have it all in a digital form. So I can tell them ahead of time, I need you to check these 3 things. And then I ask them, even the spreadsheet itself, to make it a list of things that I care about. So let's say your classic unit was never updated since the 70s. It's got a certain look and feel to it. Your mid-level upgrade unit, maybe it has black appliances, still has a simple plain countertop, maybe not a gooseneck faucet, and et cetera. And then you have a premium. So if you list those things as part of that checklist, every time they walk this unit, they'll accordingly check it off for you, so that when you take over the property, you already know, oh, C3 is getting vacated. It's a really old unit. I'm going to have to go do a full upgrade there. Versus apartment A2, oh, they already have a premium upgrade. That make ready should be quick for me to turn that unit. So that's the kind of details you want to find out when you do your detailed unit walks and due diligence. So you also don't want to be the lonely sponsor to do that due diligence with this company. You want to have a good, like an hour-long discussion with this company ahead of time that you hire for your due diligence, or you want to tell each contractor, this is what I want you to check, this is what I want you to check, and send them these electronic checklists ahead of time. And then you, with your partners, each one of you will have to run along with one person. Like you may have to go with the boiler guy, you may have to go with the AC guy, you may have to go with a plumber, etc. Right? So you want to have all hands on deck if you can. So for due diligence, recruit some friends, even potential investors, anyone who wants to learn it with you, recruit them. Because again, we're still talking physical due diligence. There's so much you can find out about a property when you get that access to every unit. So you don't want to miss that. Let's go trace it back to an initial tour of the property with a broker, right? You always want to be able to see a vacant unit, because you can discover simple things like, how old is this toilet? Literally, you lift the tank and you take a picture and it'll tell you, oh, that's a 3-gallon tank. We could easily make it more efficient with a 0.8-gallon tank, right? Things like that, if you're paying those bills. We did something very interesting with a property in Cleburne that we actually have for sale now. It's under contract to be sold. It was actually a half RUBS and half all bills paid property that the previous seller was trying to make it all into RUBS, which is ratio utility billing. And we instead did the opposite. We took over the entire property and said, All of you just have to have one bill. That's all you have to do. So with every new lease, we converted it to an all bills paid property. And we went in and did all the conservation measures. So LED upgrades, water conservation, and we even considered windows, but there were not enough windows to justify that cost in that particular property. But immediately, all of those things will impact your bottom line. And you can have an energy contract to, again, keep negotiating that to reduce your bills. So there's a lot of opportunities you might find when you do that first tour of the property. So it sort of ties your business plan to your due diligence. And then you can keep changing your business plan based on what you find in that due diligence. So you would literally, by the end of your due diligence walk, know how many units do I have to upgrade to get to pro forma rent. And you would already know from your rent roll, okay, these are the units that are already getting pro forma rent. What condition are they in? How recent was the lease? So again, it gives you a feel for the market trend. And then you say, okay, I'm going to pay $10 million for this property. For me to pay $10 million for this property, I need to achieve these rents on these unit types, right? And you went over that. So if you have to achieve such a large rent bump, let's say $100, $150 rent bumps, now you already from your due diligence know what upgrades have been done and what has not been done. So then you sit with your property manager and say, okay, these B1s are the biggest unit types with the biggest gap to my pro forma rent. My gap is like $150. What do we need to do to specifically target my B1s so that I can increase the rent by $150? What does it take? Does it take granite countertops? Does it take a new appliance? Does it take a washer dryer connection? What do I have to do? And then you figure out a plan even within that unit type that makes sense, because now you've discovered more things in the due diligence that clearly points a certain trend or a pattern, right? And then you say at a high level from the financial level, this is where your financial due diligence is so important. You study the T12. One of the things you're going to discover is, why was there a certain expense so high a particular month? And you want to go look at that and you want to investigate that and say, oh, they had to repair that. Oh, they had a crack in this building. They had to repair the foundation. So they had to take down several units. So 8 units were down. They had to vacate all those units. They had to fix this problem, right? So the T12, just from its numbers, is telling you a story. So you want to investigate that story. And these are the things that people like leasing staff or maintenance staff will be willing to chat with you about. So you want to have those kind of questions ready instead of asking the basic questions that are already available to you from the OM, right? So what else do you do in a physical due diligence besides walking every unit, making all these notes? We already talked about plumbing. You want to actually go and touch some of those cabinets and feel them and open them, because you know how bad shape they're in. Do you have to replace the whole cabinet? Can you just redo the doors, etc.? I mean, this is really due diligence. And you also find out things like, who are the hoarders? Like, I can barely walk through into this unit because they've got so much stuff all over the floor, right? So those are the ones who are actually violating a lease agreement. You agree to maintain a clean, tidy apartment, which is not full of, food and trash everywhere, that's inviting bugs, etc., right? And so that's where you discover the patterns when you take over is, oh, I remember C6 was so dirty. That resident, I don't know how long they've lived there. We need to send them a couple of violations and then get them to get on track. Otherwise, we have to bill them extra for pest control, things of that nature. That's where you discover it, is when you do those kind of walkthroughs and make these kind of notes. So your observation of these properties in that one opportunity you get to do physical due diligence is priceless. The other thing that we do is we install toilets, right, as a water conservation effort, or shower heads, etc. That's another great opportunity within your first, say, 4 to 6 weeks of takeover, if you're going to do that, to again walk the property. Again, yeah, it's another great opportunity to inspect the unit, right? Instead of just disturbing a tenant by saying, I want to look at your unit, it's like, hey, we're installing brand new toilets for you guys, and aerators and faucets and shower heads. So that's another opportunity. What other things do you note in physical due diligence? If they have any kind of a pool, if they have any kind of a splash pad, etc., you want to make a note of that. Are there any large areas that are a little bit underutilized that you could instead now use for something that is not just a resident amenity, but actually attracts more residents if occupancy is an issue, or add something that could actually generate revenue for you. Now, let's say you have large amounts of land available to you in one corner, very grassy, nice area. Do you really want to just have a soccer field there? Or do you want to apply for permits to the city to maybe have some self-storage there, right? Or even install some, I don't know what you call these structures, like wooden sheds kind of things, so that more of the maintenance stuff can be stored there. And then maybe you could get an extra studio unit from where your maintenance stuff is stored, right? So look for all different ways of opportunities for you to do that. Is your leasing office in a particularly huge unit? Does your leasing staff really need that much room, right? If you're at 100, 120 doors, I mean, the size of a studio apartment should be plenty. You don't need the size of a 3-bedroom apartment for that leasing office, right? And so if you convert that into a unit and it's a sort of a low hanging, like not a 2 or 3 story, but more of a single little building by itself where the leasing office is currently, and you find another spot for it, well, then you can charge almost like a single family home rental for this particular main office space. So look for opportunities to create additional units when you do those kind of walkthroughs. Can you take a 2-bedroom unit with a decent square footage, add the correct little door and maybe a closet, and call it a 3-bedroom unit? Does it make sense, right? So you again want to find out things like that. So when you look at your initial OM and rent roll itself, you can kind of tell, oh, it's this much of a square footage. Okay, at 1,200 square foot, I bet I could figure out a way to make that a 3-bedroom. How can I do that? Do they have a private yard kind of area where you could offer private yards to all the downstairs units? Or could you expand the existing yards, right? What kind of permits are needed for that in a city? So by the time I read the OM, I get very familiar with the city and its rules, and I make sure my PM can answer those questions. Hey, you have another property down the street from this property. What were the challenges you had during your inspection and occupancy? I have those conversations with the PM even before my first opportunity to tour the property. Again, that's part of your homework and due diligence, and very much in a lot of, level of detail, because then you really know what you know. You truly can budget for all of these expenses. I mean, if you're planning to, let's say, upgrade all of your laundry equipment because you're no longer under contract, right? You want to get bids for those things ahead of schedule if you can.